Okay, wow, we got volume 14 in front of us. We have it for a few weeks already, and we haven't had a chance to start it yet. So, Baruch Shechionu V'Kimonu V'Yigonu Zman Hazeh. We're continuing in Hilchot or Chaim, Hilchot Brachot. Up until now, we were dealing primarily with the Hilchot of Hamotzi. We dealt with Netilat Yadayim. We dealt with Hamotzi, what's bread, what's not bread, what's the status of pancakes, donuts, tortillas, wraps, and all those other things. So we're going to continue in Hilchot of Brachot. And today we're going to be focusing, at least the one topic, is going to be what does Hamotzi cover? So if I'm eating other things during the Seudah, does Hamotzi cover everything? Or could there possibly be that I'm eating a Seudah of Hamotzi and I still have to make other brachot? So it's all based on the source in Masechet Brachot, Daf Mem Aleph Amud Bet. Source number 1, Shir number 1, in volume 14 of the Tzurba, page 21. And we start. Omar Rav Papa. Papa says, Hilchata, the halacha. Devarim haboim machmas hasuda b'toch hasuda. Things that come in the middle of the meal for the meal. Okay, we have to define what does it mean, come for the meal. But so far, devarim haboim machmas hasuda b'toch hasuda, stuff that come for the meal during the meal. Ein ta'onim bracha lo lifnehem v'lo lacharehem. You don't have to make any special brachas on them. If it's a food that comes for the meal, no bracha before, no bracha after. Hamotzi and Birkat Hamazon, nothing special on that food. Bishalo machmat hasuda b'toch hasuda, but if it's a food that's not for the meal, but it's during the meal, te'onim bracha lifnehem, it's going to need a bracha beforehand. Ve'en te'onim bracha la'acharehem. So if there's a food that comes during the meal, but not for the meal, you'll have to make a bracha rishona, but not a bracha achrona, because the bracha achrona would be in Hamotzi. Okay, we're gonna have to see. Give it a minute. So far, just look at the Gemara. La'achar hasuda, if it comes after the meal, ta'onim bracha bein lifnei and bein la'achreim. So if it comes after Birkat Hamazon, you're gonna need to make a bracha before it and after. That's pashut. So now the real question is, what does it mean? A food that comes during the meal for the meal, and a food that comes during the meal not for the meal. What is that food? That is the question. So Rashi, take a page 22. Rashi, source number 2. Rashi says, "Devarim haboim machmat hasuda." What is this? Lalefet behen et hapat. To eat them together with bread. Okay. So anything that you eat together with bread, that is covered during Hamotzi. Okay. So for example, like I have, I'm gonna give my own example. So I eat herring on Shabbat, right? And I eat it with bread, right? Let's say I eat it with bread. I'm eating with bread. So I have my bread and put my herring on it. I don't have to make a shahako on the fish because it's eating it with the bread. That's what he seems to be saying. Anything left by hand at the pot to eat them together with bread. Anything that you're eating with bread. So I'm dipping my bread into baba ganoush. I'm not going to make a bracha on the baba ganoush, right? I'm using my bread in it. Anything that you're eating together with bread, that's Rashi. Anything anywhere together with bread, that doesn't need hamotzi. Anything that you're not eating together with bread, you would need to make a bracha. That's what Rashi seems to be saying. Yeah. So, according to Rashi, if I'm in the middle of my Suda and I'm eating baba ganoush, plain, according to Rashi, you have to make a bracha. We don't. That's not the halach. But according to Rashi's understanding, at least the way we understand Rashi, the lefet behen at the pot, something that you eat together with bread. So you eat it together with bread, no extra bracha. You don't eat together with bread, you're making an extra bracha. That is Rashi. Tosafot, same page. All right, source number 3. He says, Perishri, Devarim haboim machmat hasuda b'toch hasuda, koloimar. You know what it means? Food that comes during the Suda for the Suda? It means koloimar haregilim lavo machmat hasuda hapat, sharegilim la'achon im hapat, kegoin basar v'dog, mechol mini kedera, v'haboim b'toch hasuda. Ain't ta'onim bracha lefneim la'achreim, afilu ochlan b'toch hasuda mipnei atzman below pat. The kiwan the mishum pat aim bo'in hapat b'toratan. So he says a very interesting deal. Says the Re, right? This is Tosa bringing down from the Re. And he says, you know what it means to eat together with bread? It means, it means, right, something that you usually eat with a bread. So people eat fish with bread, eat meat with bread. This stuff you eat with bread. Now, even if you eat it without bread, you still don't have to make a bracha. Because this is something that usually comes during a bread meal. It's expected. I'm rushing down hamotzi, you're going to bring me fish. You're going to bring me meat. That's my suda. Okay? So that's what the Re is saying. Anything that you regularly eat during a bread meal, even if you're not eating it with bread, because sometimes you could eat it with bread, it's going to be no need for a bracha beforehand because it's during a bread seudah. Okay? But things that don't usually come during a meal, and if you're going to eat it during a meal, what's an example? Tosfot says, Kigon timarim, berimonim, beshar kol perot. Stuff such as dates, pomegranate, and other fruits. You don't usually sit down to a bread meal and they take out pomegranates and say, Anna, eat some pomegranates. Usually you don't get that during a bread meal. Okay? You don't get fruits.
Or melon.
Let's not get to that step yet. You're jumping.
Melon.
You don't usually eat during a soup.
No. We would usually eat it with the bread.
When you eat it with bread.
Usually when I want to eat the melon, usually when I eat it with the bread.
You eat bread with melon? I've never eaten bread with melon.
Great.
Hold on.
Great. You eat with the bread.
Okay, so we'll see. If you eat it with the bread, you'll see you don't have to say, bro. Yeah.
I make food, I eat bread, food, everything. Then I eat food, I said bracha without the bread. And I decided to eat bread with something else after that.
Again, you ate bread.
Food, everything.
You made bread, everything, okay.
And the fruits.
And the fruits?
I said bracha.
You made bracha,
without the.
Right.
Then I decided after the fruit, I want to eat some bread.
You said you finished your meal?
Yeah, but I am not said bracha on the fruit.
Yeah.
But I'm eating bread again after.
That's fine. Yeah, you're supposed to actually make a bracha on fruits. That's what Tosfot says. Timarim, dates, verimonim, mishar kol perot, she'ein regilim alepet b'hen tapat. You don't usually eat them with bread.
No, but if you eat with the bread.
Yeah, before we got Amazon, I'm in the middle of my meal.
Eat with the bread. Fruits with the bread. You don't have to say
It's actually machlok. It's not so simple. Some say you still have to say bracha, even if you eat with bread. She'ein regilim alepet b'hen tapat. To onin bracha lifnehen. You're gonna need a bracha beforehand. So if you're middle of your su'udah, you wash your hands, you ate bread, and now you want to have a date or a rimon, and it's not on the menu. It's not part of what you were going to actually eat as your main course. Okay, you're now eating fruits, not dessert. You just want fruits in the middle of your su'udah. Okay, desserts. Let's not get to dessert. Just like, I want to eat fruits now. You have to make a bracha beforehand.
Was sitting at the table?
What do you mean?
Off the table.
You'll have to make a bracha on the perot.
It was on the table.
Even if it's on the table. So it depends on what it means with part of the Suda. We're going to get there. Right now, this is the idea. The idea is food that you eat usually during a bread meal, even if you're not eating it with bread, doesn't need an extra bracha. Hamotzi covers it. Food that you don't usually eat during a bread meal and you bring it in, and Tosa says, what's the example? Dates and pomegranates that you usually don't eat during a bread meal. That is going to need a separate bracha. Shulchan Aruch. Okay, Shulchan Aruch is going to paskin like this Tosfot. So let's take a look. Source number 4. Devarim habayim mitach hasuda. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Im heim devarim habayim mahmat haseuda. Dahainu devarim shederech. It's the derech likvoa seuda aleim lelefet behem etapat. This is a suda. This is the way you set a suda. You eat it together with bread, kigon basar, so meat, vidagim, and fish, ubeitzim, and eggs, birakot, and vegetables. Vegetables usually come during a bread meal. Ukvina and cheese. Vidisa. What is disa? So disa is porridge. So this is like cooked wheat, right? This is pasta. This is kashamana, whatever these different things you have. So vidisa. Or salty foods, right? Like pickles and olives. These usually come during a bread meal. Afilu ochlam below pot, even if you're not eating it with bread, but usually they come during a bread meal. Ein tonim bracha lifnehem. The brachat hamotzi b'toratan, because the bracha of hamotzi covers them. Below la'achreihem, and you don't have to make a bracha after them. The brikat hamazon b'toratan, because the brikat hamazon covers them. So to sum up what we're up to right now on page 22, it's a very simple. Okay, the diak is very simple. If it's something that I usually eat during a bread meal, and the examples are fish, meat, eggs, vegetables, cheese, porridge, salty foods. If you eat them, even if you're not eating it with bread, but since it usually comes during a bread meal, I don't need to make a bracha not before them and not after them. The Shulchan Aruch continues in source 4, the im heim divarim haboin shelo machmat haseuda the hainush ein derech lekvos suda aleihem the lefet behemet tapat. But if you're eating something that usually doesn't come part of a seuda, you're eating something that's not usually eaten with bread. Kigon, what are the examples? Says the Shulchan Aruch. So I guess Shulchan Aruch also wasn't in Uzbekistan, Gabriel, because he says to einim, dates, va'anovim, and grapes, chomine peros, and all types of fruits that are not eaten with bread. Im oichel otam below pots, if you're going to eat them without pots, right? Im ochal otam below pots, teonim bracha lifnehem. You have to make a bracha before you eat them. Tibrikat hamotzi eina putoratan, because the bracha hamotzi doesn't cover them, because it's not something you usually eat with bread. The lav mi'ikr su'udahem, they're not part of the main suda. The eina tonim bracha lachrein, but you don't make a bracha after that. So according to this, I made hamotzi. I'm eating my food, and now you bring me grapes, and I want to eat grapes. I make a bari priya eitz on the grapes. I finish eating my grapes. I do not make a bracha al ha'etz on the grapes. My birkat hamazon that will be on the bread will also cover the grapes that I made a second bracha for. Okay, the kivan shabito shabal b'toch suda, since they came during the suda, birkat hamazon patortam. So birkat hamazon would cover them. Okay, so up until now, get it very clear through your heads. As follows: if it's something that usually comes during a bread meal, and I made hamotzi, I don't have to make a bracha on it, even if I'm not going to eat it directly with bread, because it's something that comes with a bread su'uda. Porridge, cooked foods, whatever it is, meat, fish, whatever it is, salty food. Foods that don't usually come during a bread su'uda, and our example was fruits, right? Such as tainim, dates, and grapes, and other such things. Then if you're going to eat them during the su'uda, not directly with bread, you're going to have to make a hamotzi. Okay, you're going to make al ha'etz, bari priya gefen. I'm a little confused. Okay, you're eating it during the seudah, not with bread directly. You're going to have to make a bari priya eitz on the fruit during the seudah. Okay, now the Mishnah Brura is going to explain why this is. Vidisa, this is the kasha. Okay, so you have cooked kasha. Are you cooking wheat or something? Vidisa, porridge. Av shehi ava, even though it's thick. No one, it's not normal. I mean, not no one does it, but it's not normal. You don't take kasha and put it on a piece of bread and eat it, right? It's not the way you usually eat it. Usually you have kasha in front of you and you eat it with the spoon directly in your mouth, right? You don't usually eat it with the bread. Usually you eat porridge, kasha by yourself. Mikol malkam, kimun shabbat lehesvia. Since it comes to fill you up during a meal, it's part of the meal, so you come out full from the meal. Ikar su'udahi, it's the main part of the meal. Then it's felet lahapat, and it becomes secondary to the bread, right? Because we know the dinim of brachot, ikar v'tefel, right? You have the main food and the subordinate food, right? For example, let's say I'm eating plov, right? And in the plov, I have my rice and I have my carrots, right? I don't have to make a bracha on the carrots because the carrots is secondary. The main part of the food is the rice. Make a mizonot, good to go. Okay, ikar v'tef.
Tomatoes, cucumbers, and the avocado.
tomatoes, cucumbers, and avocado, and you're making a salad. So what's the ikr? What's the ikr and what's the table? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. If they're gonna call it avocado salad, right? Now it has a shame avocado, right? So the shame might take over being the most important. It might have to be in an eighth. You always can do separately. You can take some vegetables and make a dome and make an eighth.
Majority is Adama, and they usually you say on Adama on 3 also, so cover it, you know?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that. We're not up to Iker V'Tefel yet. Iker V'Tefel, we'll get into that B'ez Hashem in the future. But right now, the Shavruah says that that's the whole idea here. The bread is the main thing, and these are secondary to the bread. And that's why you don't make a bracha on them. Yes, Malkiel.
What about the meat in the plov? The Benzo not covers it or no?
The meat,
The pieces of meat they could.
Part of the floor.
Separate bracha.
No, it's part of it.
Okay, so Iker V'Tefel is going to be in the future lesson.
Part of it.
And it could be considered part of it. Most people, I think, if you get especially big pieces of meat, people would say a separate bracha shahakol on it, just because it's like big pieces of meat and you're eating it on the side. But we're going to get into Iker V'Tefel, B'ez Hashem V'Tefel in the future. For now, the idea, just to know that idea exists. Just know that the idea exists. But for example, in Bachsh, no one makes a separate bracha on the meat, right? Because it's tiny meat and it's in there, and it's really a tafel. It's really a subordinate to the rice. Just make him his own, and you go, right?
Part of meat, part of the
Plov, but sometimes the meat is so big, it's like so separate, it's like so good that it's like a whole different thing. Okay, so we have to get into it in the future, but that's the idea right now. Okay, so now let's take a look. Not in your book, not in the Tzurbas in front of you. I have the Yalkut Yosef English edition. You can probably find one over there in Brachot too. And on page 58, it says as follows, just to sum up what we learned. Halacha 4. Once a person says hamotzi on bread and starts a bread meal, he does not have to make any other brachot during the meal, as long as those foods are normally eaten as part of the meal. Examples include meat, fish, eggs, vegetable, cheese, and pickled foods. It does not matter whether the person actually eats these foods together with bread or without bread. Either way, they are considered foods eaten with bread. And that's it. Likewise, during a meal, it's unnecessary to recite an additional bracha. Number 2, page 59. It's not necessary to recite additional blessing on cooked cereal. That's your kasha, right? That's your porridge. Or pasta, rice, couscous, or any such food, even though they're not eaten with bread. Most people are not eating couscous with bread. Most people are not eating pasta. No one's taking, now they put pasta on pizza and they make it sell it as a slice. But most people don't eat pasta on bread, right? But since these foods are meant to fill you up during the meal, they do not require another bracha. Hamotzi is what covers them. So everything we learned up until right now, that's what the Yalkut Yosef sums up for us. Yeah, I've seen that, the pasta slice. I don't understand the thing in it, but I guess if the pizza professor makes it, it's good. Yeah, it tastes good. He's biased. He works for all these guys. Okay. Now we're going to come into another sugya over here. The Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says.
But that means pasta on the pizza makes it a mozzarella because it's doubled, right? If it's 2 slices a mozzarella, so this is pasta on top of.
Who said 2 slices are hamotzi? 1 slice might be hamotzi. That was last week's shir. All right, we're coming up with a loop shot. Okay.
No.
Yeah. All right. Listen to last week's, not last week, 3 weeks ago shir. All right, we're not going to get into that today. We already dealt with that. Okay, listen to the Magen Avram. Magen Avram has an interesting idea here. He says, look in source number 6. So dehain tefilim lepat, since they're a tefel, they're secondary to pot, therefore you don't make a bracha on that, right? That's what we've been saying. Then he says, v'lechein, nearly, it seems to me, says the Magen Avram, tim ein chayfetz le'achol pat, ve'achol me'at pat, u'mevarach alav hamotzi, ein poter ha'ma'achalim. All right, this guy has a whole thing of fruits and vegetables on his table. And he'll have to make different brachos for everything. He doesn't want to make different brachos for everything. So he says, you know what? I'll wash my hands. I'll make a motzi. I have a little bit of bread. Then I don't have to make any more brachos.
Don't usually eat them. Not good.
Can he get away with this?
Yes.
Can he get away with making a hamotzi in order not to have to make any other brachot and any other food? Vegetables, porridge, meat, chicken, everything else is on the table.
Covering
But why? But why is it covering everything? Because we said it's a tafel. It's subordinate, meaning I'm eating bread, and bread's the main thing. And so whatever's secondary to the bread, I don't have to make a bracha for. But here the guy doesn't want the bread. He's only eating the bread in order not to make any other bracha. He doesn't make a shahak, he doesn't want to make a dama, he doesn't want to make a ha'etz, he doesn't make any other bracha. He wants to say a motzi, and I'm done.
He has
So-
to eat at least like a zayit.
But is it considered a tafel? Is it considered secondary? It's not considered secondary. The bread is secondary to his food because he wants to eat everything else.
So you can make hamotzi then.
So the Magen Avram says. So that's what he says. V'lachei near the leads im ein chavetz elchol pat elchol mi'at pat v'barchol hamotzi ein poter machalim. If he's eating bread just in order not to say any other brachot, then he cannot eat those other food without making brachot on them. Meaning that hamotzi that he made in order not having to say anything else doesn't work at all. He's going to have to make a bracha on everything else. Okay, so you take a look in the Yalkut Yosef in source on page 58, note 47. He goes through this Magin Avraham, and he mentions here at the end that if you take a look at the second column, the Mishnah Brura cites Achronim who wrote that because of this safek, one should not do this. A person should not do this. And make separate brachot, and don't think you can make a hamotzi on a piece of bread and that's it. No, you should make a bracha everything else. But there is one exception when you can do this. There's one exception when you can purposely make a motzi, eat a piece of bread just in order not to say brachos and anything else. Shabbat and Yom Tov. Why? Why? Because it's a mitzvah to eat bread on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Because there's now a chiyuv to eat bread, even though you don't want to eat the bread, but it's a mitzvah to eat the bread. So if you make a hamotzi on the bread, right, I have to eat it because it's part of Shabbos and Yom Tov. I don't want to eat it, but I have to eat it. So since I made the hamotzi and I needed to make that hamotzi, so therefore everything else that I really want to eat would be covered. Even though on a weekday this would not work because you have no chiyuv in that hamotzi, therefore you really don't have to say it. Therefore you're saying it is not going to work. Okay, so that's that little exception there. That's the Mishnah Brura and the Magin Avraham. Fine. So far, so good. Now, what about so our example so far was fruit that you're eating in the middle of a Suda, you would have to make a bracha on, right? Bring grapes and stuff. What about if it's cooked with meat? Right? Yeah. People put they make quincy apples, or people they make fish, right? They make honey mustard fish and they put it on top of apple slices. So and now I want to eat that fruit. Is it?
It's part of
Is it? Is it not? I don't know. We have to see. You're saying it's part of the meal. That's the way we paskin. But let's take a look. Okay, let's take a look. Magin Avraham, source number 7. Page 23. Right. They put fruit.
Queen apple.
Quincy apple is fruit. So let's take a look. Umihu. Heiros mibushalin ve'enehu. If you put full cooked fruits, yesh safek im yivarech. Says the Magin Avraham, there's a safek whether or not you have to make a bracha on cooked fruit. Safek. Because maybe it's part of the meal, like you're saying, but maybe it's still fruit. And fruit doesn't usually come during a meal. That's a safek. Look, Mishnah Brura, source number 8, page 24. Even if you cook the fruit with meat, mashma, it seems, you still have to make a bracha the ein haperot na'asin tefillin lebasar, because fruit is not considered secondary to meat; they're separate, and therefore you have to make a separate bracha on them. There are some achronim that say that you have to make a separate bracha on cooked fruit, ha'etz or whatever it is. Okay, so we have to see. Hold on. We're working the process now. Come out in a minute to the final halach. Let's work the process. Hello. It's not like the Chai Adam. Chai Adam, just a brief biographical sketch on the Chai Adam. Chai Adam was a rabbi in Europe, but he spent 15 years being a businessman in a fair, and he was doing a lot of business. He was very successful, and he wrote a sefer, the Chai Adam, a halachic sefer. And at first, people were like, "What is this businessman writing a halachic sefer?" So he had to write a whole thing. Like, even when I was doing business, my whole mind was always on learning Torah. I've been learning Torah every second of the day, every time that I was. He said, "I'm not doing this to show off, but rather to tell you that even though a person is doing business, he could be learning Torah the whole time." And his svarim are very much used today. In fact, many of these shivot, many of the Nusach Ashkenazi shivot, the halachas they follow are based on the Chai Adam, okay, not the Mishnah Berurah. And the more Nusach Sfard, not Hasidus, Nusach Sfard yeshivas, they might go with the Mishnah Berurah, but most Ashkenaz schools usually go with the Chai Adam's stack. Anyway, Chai Adam says, like you, that fruit that's cooked with meat is part of the meat. He says, I also found in the Sefer Yad Kitana that he's also inclined to say that one should not recite a bracha, but he writes a different reason. That where the fruit is cooked with the meat or with the fat or honey, and he makes it into a cooked dish, it seems it's not as a dessert, but rather it's coming as part of the main meal, and therefore it's considered a cooked food. Right?
I like to smoke on top of the.
Garlic is a bad example because garlic is a vegetable, not a fruit. But the same idea.
Garlic,
right.
It's all in one.
Right. It's coming as a tafshil, coming as a cooked food to be eaten during the meal. The kishmish in the plov, right? Right. So they're coming as part of the suda. Right. That's what he's saying. That's what the Yad Kitana says also. It's part of the main dish. Kashar tavshilin. It's coming to be eaten with bread. He says that the Mishnah Berurah says, if you don't want to get into this suffix, you want to eat something that the Ashkenazim have called tzimis. Do you know what tzimis is? So apparently it's like a puree of pears and apples that's cooked. I'm not sure. Anyway, the tzimis, the pears from Boshlem, yikach chila eza perichai. He says, in order to get out of this suffix of whether a cooked fruit, you have to make a bracha or not on it, take a raw fruit and make a bracha on it. Because everyone says a raw fruit during the Suda, you have to make a bracha on it. So take a raw fruit, eat it. In this way, you'll come out of the suffix. If you don't have a raw food, then what do? Eat it together with the bread. Remember, that's the second way out. If you eat the fruit together with the bread, then you're showing that it's part of the meal, and you don't have to what's it called? Make a separate bracha on that. If you page 61, what would be the difference? Page 61. Look what he writes over here. Halacha 10. He says over here, during a meal, if someone began eating fruits together with his bread, and then he decides to eat some fruits without bread, as long as he intends to continue to eat more fruit with bread afterwards, he needs to recite no extra bracha. In this case, even the fruit that he eats without bread is considered part of the meal. Okay, I want to eat a raw fruit. You have to make a bracha on it. But let's say I don't want to make the bracha on it extra. So what do? I eat a piece of fruit. So imagine you have a banana, you make a bracha on it, but I don't want to make a bracha on it. I take my banana, I put it with a piece of bread, and I eat it together. Then I can eat my banana regular, and when I end, I take another piece of banana with the bread and I eat it again. And that's good. Even though I ate the whole middle of the banana without bread, I don't have to make a bracha on it. Right. Beginning and end, I ate it with bread. and then that's good. That's what Shulchan Aruch says. However, look in the Yalkut Yosef. Some poskim disagree with this. Ruin it. Even in this case, you still have to make a bracha on the fruit because you're eating part of it without bread. Therefore, in order to avoid any situation of doubt, says the Yalkut Yosef, it's best to begin eating the fruits without bread, so that one will definitely be obligated to recite a bracha. So the Yalkut Yosef also says, if you're going to eat fruit during a meal, better make a separate bracha on the raw fruits. Don't eat it with the bread, because some Achronim argue that the bread thing doesn't work. But it is an option if you have no other choice. Okay, so far, this is what we've seen. Says the Bir Halacha. Right, Bir Halacha is also for the Chavetz Chaim in his Mishnah Berurah. He has another section called the Bir Halacha, and he writes, "Kigon te'enim, ve'ayin sham be'emek bracha, hatam dahoil she'en ragim levoy le'ikar suda." He says that figs are not considered part of the meal. That since they don't come, they're not part of the main suda. Therefore, the parish that Medina Sheyesh Sham, Riboy Perot, in places and countries where they have a lot of fruits, Uvashlim Sham Tomid Perot Lamazan, and they usually always cook fruit with food. In countries where they usually do this, Kamova Medina Tainu, like in Europe, Bishar Tavshilim, Mistavra Lachar Diyesh Loidin Shar Hafshel. So says the Chavetz Chaim and his Bir Halacha that in countries like ours, where fruits are plenty and fruits are thrown into everything, right? The fruits are thrown into all types of dishes. Then they're considered a tafshil. And if you have a cooked fruit, you do not have to make a bracha on them. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Let's take a look at the Piskei Teshuvah, source 10, page 25. Umikol al nilmad lemash motzav zmanenu. From all this, we can learn what we have in today. The all kinds of side dishes and main dishes. We have rice with kubiot, carrots, gezer potatoes, muchadama, bichadoma, right? You have rice that's cooked with fruits, raisins and schmaisins. You have other food that's cooked all types of fruits. They're cooked together.
The Iranian, right? Rice with orange peel, whatever.
Orange peel rice, okay, you have all these type of things. Rices and pineapples are thrown into a lot of stuff, right? Ananas, are these fruits that are commonly found in cooked foods do not require a separate bracha. So because the way we eat food today is different than the way they ate food in the past, therefore our fruits that are eaten together with meat and fish that are cooked with all these type of things definitely do not require a separate bracha. Take a look at the Yalkut Yosef, page 63. Halacha 12. He writes over here, you have monoshel peiros mevushalim. You have peiros that are cooked. They're mixed, they're cooked. Mishamshimim v'shizifim v'tzumukim. Apricots, prunes, and raisins. And they're served along with the meal. Even if people would eat it without bread, no bracha is necessary because they're cooked together with chicken or beef.
Part of the ingredients.
It's part of the ingredients. It's part. If someone chooses to be worried about it and he wants to recite a bracha on a separate fruit, he will receive a special bracha from Shemai. Because there are achronim that argue, there are achronim who say the fruit doesn't become a secondary to the cooked food. So therefore, if you are careful to say an extra bracha on a fruit while eating a cooked fruit, you'll get a special bracha. Not eating it with bread. Stop. Cooked fruit. Even eating it with the bread, there are some who are saying that's not enough. So it seems to be that there are achronim that say fruit, cooked, not cooked, part of food, whatever, always requires its separate bracha. Because of this suffix, people who are machmer, people who are anshe ma'aseh and want to do the right thing, will take a raw fruit, make that separate bracha on that, and this way to be yotze all day out. For regular people, Easiest thing is as follows to remember. If you're eating cooked fruit, part of a cooked dish, or even if it's not part of a cooked dish, it's just it's not part of a meat, but it's a cooked fruit that you eat during a meal, you don't have to make a separate bracha on it. And if you want, you can eat raw fruit even with a piece of bread, beginning and end, and you don't have to make a bracha on it either. Again, there are achronim who say you still should make a bracha, and it's good to be acting that way if you can. I put here to look at note 53, where he writes from the Halacha Brura, right? So this is Rabbi David Yosef, another son of Chamuvadia, and he writes that in modern society, people consider compote to be a side dish that is not part and parcel of the meal. That is part and parcel of the meal. Part of the meal. Therefore, you don't have to make a bracha. But then he writes, this is only theoretically. And in practice, one should eat a bit of bread with the compote to eat together with the fruit. So, like I said, it comes out like this.
Why it's like a drink. It's part of the whole meal.
So he's saying as follows. So this is the way I understand it. This is the way I understand it.
Well, what about apple sauce or cranberry sauce or this sauce, that sauce? Part of the meal?
He's according to what he's saying, you would have to make a bracha on them.
Why? It's complicated.
But the way we are learning that we have what to rely on. If it's something that usually comes part of the meal, even if it's fruits, because it's common nowadays in our areas and it's cooked, it's part of the meal, you don't have to make a bracha on them. If you want to be machmer and take a separate raw fruit and make a bracha, you'll get a special bracha.
Now, if we go by here, right? So the compote has the hadamah in there and ace in there. So now you're going to be fishing on Shabbat. Now with border kicks in, and all kind of problems start.
So you have an apple and a banana, you make eggs, you make adama, and you're good to go. Before you get to the compote, you make separate brachas on an apple and a banana, and you go through, right? Interesting. We're not talking about hadama right now, but I mentioned before, Moshe Feinstein, the bracha never made a mezonah on rice because we say orez is rice and orez is mezonot, but it's actually a question if orez is actually translated as rice. Orez, according to some, is millet. Therefore, rice might actually just be hadama, and it might not be even mezonot. We paskin that it is. But Moshe was worried about this, so what he did, Rav Moshe would eat a cookie, make a mezonot. Then we eat a vegetable, make a hadama, and then only then eat rice. All right. So those who are anshe ma'aseh, those people who are worried and people want to do the right thing, that's the way they do it. They would eat this, and that, and then eat the foods that have a suffix on them.
So with us, the main food is rice. But for them, in Europe, it wasn't.
They didn't have so much rice. They had potatoes. Right.
What happened? What they were eating before potatoes came in?
I have no idea.
America was discovered. What did that have?
I don't know. Okay, so what do we have right now? Halacha l'maisa, halacha l'maaseh. How do we come out of this year? If we're eating fruits that are part of a meal, it's cooked, it's part of a dish, it's something that's normally eaten during a bread meal, you do not need to make a bracha on them. And you can go without making a bracha. If you want to do extra, take a raw fruit, make a bracha on that, and then go to that. And that's extra. You do not have to do that. Okay, fine. So far, so good. Now, what about, I'm about to sit down to wash my hands to eat a bread meal, but they're starting off with a cantaloupe, or they're starting off with a fruit bowl. So what do we do? So let's take a look. So says the Penina Halacha. Kol haperos ve'erakot shenachalim im hamachalim shenoadu l'svia. All fruits and vegetables that are eaten in order to satiate. It's part of the main meal. Eating it in order to eat the meal. Bein chayim, bein mushalim. Says whether they're raw or whether they are cooked. Even if they're raw, but you're eating it for the meal to get full. Brachat hamotzi p'toratam. Bracha hamotzi is enough.
So when you want to feel full, you eat it in the end of the meal or in the beginning.
So let's say this. This is what Chucky was saying before. So this is what I'm saying now. I'm sitting down to hamotzi meal, but my menu is to eat fruit. Part of my main meal is to start off with fruit. That's my main. That's going to fill me up. I'm on a diet from old meat, from old protein. My meal is fruit. So what do I do? So says the Yalkut Yosef. I'm switching over to the Yalkut Yosef for a second. Page 63, halacha 13. If someone eats fruit as the main course of his meal, the fruit are considered a part of the meal, and no bracha is necessary. Not before and not after, because it is now my main course.
So bread covers it?
Yeah. So if I'm sitting down to a bread meal and all I have is grapes and apples, and that's my main meal, then the hamotzi covers the bread and then it covers the grapes and the apples. So it's only if I'm sitting down to a meat meal or a fish meal, and now you bring me a grape. Now I have to make a ha'etz on it. But if my main part of the meal is to eat grapes, then I don't have to make a ha'etz on it. It's made it more complicated for everybody, right?
So now, if these fruits and vegetables are stuffing inside the meat, what would do that?
So for us, we would paskin off make a bracha on it, right? Because it's part of the thing. But there are Chorim would say no, because now you're eating a meat meal. Fruits are not considered part of it, and you have to make a separate bracha. Right? You see how you see the steps? Like it's all like depending exactly what you're doing and who you're holding. Like so, for us, we don't have to make a separate bracha on the stuffing. No matter make a fruits, whatever it is, because it's part of the main meal. So much so that even if you're eating a raw fruit, but that is your intention to eat it as part of your meal, you do not have to make a bracha. But says the Yalkut Yosef, there are poskim who disagree with this, who say even if you're eating the fruit, a raw fruit as your main part of the meal, you still have to make a separate bracha on it. There are some poskim who say that. Therefore, he says, if you're in such a case where you're making a hamotzi meal and all you have is fruits, then you should eat some of the fruit with the bread. Because remember that you have that loophole. You eat the bread with the fruit, then it's considered that. So you have these different levels. So on one level, right, you can eat hamotzi with intention to eat fruit as your main course. You don't have to make a bracha on that. Better to eat that fruit with bread. And this way you can show that it's subordinate to the bread. Okay? But there are even those posts who disagree with that and say you should say a bracha separately on the fruit. Right.
And on the table, we have bread. Those are part of the meal. Salad they brought it up.
Okay.
And they have oranges, whatever.
But the rabbi says even if it's sitting at the table.
And what else did you have on the table? Did you have fish and sardines and dips and stuff like that? So there would be a chodim that would say you would still have to make a separate bracha. So in such a case, you have really two options. If you want to eat the grapes without a bracha, you should eat the grapes, whatever it is, with a piece of bread. Right? The first grape with a piece of bread, and the last grape you should eat with a piece of bread. And then all the grapes in the middle are covered. Second option you have is to make a separate bracha on the grape, because you're eating bread with other things. And so that's now becoming a separate entity. Okay? And it's not the main course. Now, if you're going to say that part of the main course, if it's not main course, then you can't get away with eating it without a bracha. Either eat it with the bread or you make a separate bracha. That's your really two options. Okay.
So the spread, the jam and spread, all this stuff.
A jam spread is not a different story. That's already a different story. That's different. Okay. Now, continues the Panini Halacha. Continues. Page 25. We're on source 11. From the word but. If they served sweet carrot salad or Waldorf salad. What's a Waldorf salad? Some sort of salad. Right? We're Bukharians. What salad? What salad? Give me the meat. Right? I remember my father had his Rosh Yeshiva, Zecher Tzaddik V'Bracha, Rabbi Nechemia Yagudayev, from Eretz Yisrael. He came to our house to eat, and my mother made plov. And by the time she finished plov, she realized we didn't have either cucumbers or tomatoes we didn't have to make the salad. All right, and it was late at night already, and the stores are all closed. And so we told the Rosh Hashiva, we're so sorry, we forgot to get the salad. And he said, if you have good plov, you don't need a salad. If you have the good plov, you don't need a salad. Right? The salad, we don't need so much. Right. Anyway, if they serve sweet carrot salad or Waldorf salad after the meal for dessert, okay? So you finish the main meal, now they're serving you dessert. Then you definitely have to make a bracha on it. Okay? They're serving you fruits after the meal. As a dessert, you have to make a bracha. Likewise, right. Likewise, one must recite a bracha rishona on kompot, all right, which is cooked fruits with sugar served at the end of the meal. So if you're eating it at the end of a meal, right? So take a look at the Yalkut Yosef's Torah, halacha 14. Someone is served fruit as dessert, he must recite a separate blessing before eating it. But it's not necessary to recite a separate blessing after the fruit. This is true whether the fruit is raw or cooked. Birkat Hamazon covers everything that was eaten, even that dessert. Okay, so the story is, I'm finishing my meal, I'm done eating, and now you're serving me dessert. I didn't say Birkat Hamazon yet, right? And it's fruits or sweet salad. I have to make a separate bracha, but I do not make a bracha after a bracha rechona. The Birkat Hamazon will cover that fruit. Okay, good.
So what about the cake?
Okay, we're going to deal with cake in a moment. Can you bring me Yaakov Joseph 1, brachot 1? We'll get there in a second. Very good.
So cake as a dessert.
We're going to deal with that in a second. Now, if one serves grapefruit or melon at the start of a meal, I didn't start my meal yet, and they're starting with the appetizer, right? That's what it's called, appetizer. All right, I'm starting with an appetizer. What I knew now, one must recite a bracha rishona on them. Since they're a type of dessert served at the start of the meal to open it with a good taste, they are not considered part of the meal. It's a separate thing. Appetizer, separate price, right? Separate cost. It's not the main meal. But foods served at the beginning of a meal, such as sour foods, are included in the meal, and the motzi exempts them. Okay.
Sometimes at the wedding they serve these little cups with strawberries. And
right. So they serve those little
kiwis.
cups or stuff like
it's
that.
like
and
on the side, right?
Didn't start yet. So
You're right, but it's already there in the beginning.
The Penina Halacha says you will have to make a bracha rishona. Take a look at the Yalkut Yosef, page 62, Halacha 11. He says,
you didn't say how much yet?
Let's see. Often a half a cantaloupe or some other fruit is served at the beginning of a meal. Okay, so beginning of a meal. Some poskim rule that it's necessary to recite a separate blessing on this. But others say it's not necessary. Since it's fruits to whet the appetite and thus part of the meal. Since the Rishonim debated, we must apply the safek brachot lahakel. Therefore, you should not say the bracha, says the Yalkut Yosef. Not like the Penina Halacha. So if you have that cantaloupe in the front in the beginning, so you made it hamotzi, you sat down, you have the cantaloupe now. You do not make that bracha on the cantaloupe. But it's not part of the meal. The meal's coming. This is just an appetizer.
Fine, it's opening.
It's the opening act, right? No, there's a debate. It's machloket rishonim. Since the machloket rishonim says the Yalkut Yosef, suffer bracha la'akal, don't make a bracha. It's the best to avoid the question by reciting a blessing over the fruit before beginning the meal. So the blessing will cover the one served as an appetizer. Now what he says to do is eat the cantaloupe before hamotzi. All right, then make hamotzi, and then you can continue eating your fruit. Right. So the appetizer is a big halachic question. Okay, it's a machloket rishonim if an appetizer requires a separate bracha or not. Okay, because it's not part of the main meal. But I already washed. Maybe it is part now. It's to get me in the mood of the main meal. So, halach l'maisa, if you already washed, and now you have the appetizer in front of you, the Yalkut Yosef says not to make a bracha. Safek brachet la'akel, don't make the bracha. We're going to say like the Rishonim who say, it's meant to whet your appetite. But if you see the cantaloupe there before, you should make a bracha on the cantaloupe before you wash your hands for hamotzi, right? And then you can go wash hamotzi. That's the process for us.
It's
All
like
right.
the brach of shehako and water. It's better to say before hamotzi.
Is it?
I don't know. As far as I know, the
Oh,
halacha is because it's also a safek.
is
Whether you
it
have to say
better to
shehako
say
during the meal or not.
shahako on the water before saying hamotzi?
It's
That's
better
what
to. I heard.
Yeah, it's better. Okay, we're gonna get to Rez Hashem. V'tafel, we're gonna get to Rez Hashem. All right, now, someone mentioned about other desserts. Okay, right. So far, what did we learn? So Rabbi Gabriel, we learned that if I'm eating dessert at the end before Birkat Hamazon, I finish my meal. Before Birkat Hamazon, you give me a fruit. I have to make a eight on it. Right? That's what we said. What about others? Let's say they're giving me ice cream. Says the Shas Tshuva Shevet Alevi, Rav Wozner. Rav Wozner says it seems that concerning sweet items such as ice cream or chocolate, it's obvious that they do not have the status of drinks, right? Because drinks, once you make hamotzi, your drinks cover most. It covers most drinks. Hamotzi covers your juice, covers your other stuff. He says though, ice cream is not considered a drink, and one must make a bracha before them. And many people don't do it, and it's a mistake. Shal Shetshuva.
You have to say separate.
Yeah. According to the Shal Shetshuva Shevet Levi, Rav Wozner, if you're eating ice cream at the end of a seudah, you have to make a shahako on it.
Or wait for it to melt.
No, even before it's melted. Says the Or L'Tzion, right? Harav Chacham, Harav Ben Tzion Abba Shaul, right? Say Chatzal Gebracha. Charles Shechus Or L'Tzion. He says, it seems to me that dairy ice cream is not considered. It has the status of food. It's considered a food, not a drink. Since it comes as a dessert, one must recite a bracha over it. But other types of frozen desserts, such as sorbet, right? He says that is a liquid, and therefore they do not require a bracha. So the question really is it considered a liquid or not? Fruit juice is covered under hamotzi, right? Is ice cream considered a juice? So Shal Sheshuva of Rav Wozner says it's not a juice, it's a food. Or L'Tzion says it's a food, and you have to make a separate bracha on it. Or L'Tzion makes a distinction between sorbet and ice cream. Sorbet is just frozen water, frozen juice. So it's going to be no bracha needed on it because it's frozen juice. Okay. Yalkut Yosef. He brings here the Yalkut Yosef, source 14, and he writes, ideally, it is inappropriate to eat ice cream during a meal or at the end. Rather, you should leave it for after Birkat Hamazon, because we're not sure. It's food, it's a drink, it needs a bracha, doesn't need a bracha. Say Birkat Hamazon, and then make a shahaka on the ice cream. He writes, there's no difference in ice cream with milk or parva ice cream or sorbet for that matter. No difference. You should make Birkat Hamazon and then eat your desserts. If nevertheless he does eat ice cream at the end before Birkat Hamazon, he should not recite a bracha. Right? This is the Chamabaji's famous psak, Safek brachot lahakel. When you have a safek, what to do, say it or not, you don't say it. So when it comes to ice cream, he says it's a safek, whether to say it or not. You look at the Yalkut Yosef in our English one on page 64, halacha 15, where he writes, when eating sweets as a dessert after meal, it's necessary to recite a separate blessing before eating them. Right? If you're eating a sweet like fruits at the end of the meal, you have to make a separate bracha. Some posts can rule that ice cream might be considered a drink, a beverage in its frozen state. If it's a beverage, if it's a drink, no separate bracha is necessary, right? But some say that ice cream is a food. Frozen milk is now a food. Since it's a safek, they recommend it from refraining eating such a dessert until after reciting Birkat Hamazon. Other poskim reason, even if ice cream is considered a drink, even if it is a drink, which usually say a drink is covered, the blessing of Hamotzi covers any beverage that one might drink to wash down food. Which drink is covered by Hamotzi? Only drink that's meant to help you put the food down. But ice cream is not helping you get the food down. You're not washing down the food. Therefore, Hamotzi never covers ice cream. And therefore, you should always say a bracha on ice cream. But again, like we said, safek brachot la'akel, better to do it after Birkat Hamazon. Here he brings down that two of Chacham Ovadia's sons gave testimony of what Chacham Ovadia did in practice. And they give opposite testimony. One son says that the Chacham Ovadia ate it before Birkat Hamazon, and one says he did it after Birkat Hamazon. One says he did it with the bracha, so he didn't do it with the bracha. So we're not sure. So we can't take either of their testimonies. We can't take either of their testimonies as fact. So the Maisa, what do we do with ice cream? After Birkat Hamazon. Okay. Now Shabbat and Yom Tov, you always want to do this. You always want to make Birkat Hamazon, and then eat your dessert. You can make more brachot. Okay. On a regular day, you don't have to, but it's probably better course to make Birkat Hamazon and then eat your desserts because you get out a lot of safeks. Because you saw if you eat something sweet like fruit, you're gonna have to make a bracha. Ice cream, we're not sure about. Popsicles, sorbet, also questionable. What it is, what it's not.
Separate meals, so you have we put eggs separately. Maybe even in the dish.
Egg is part of the meal. Yeah. No. Shulchan Aruch said egg is part of the meal. You're on the beginning. Mustard with dugam and bates him. Eggs are part of a regular meal. Okay, now comes your question from before Rabbi Gabriel. Your question was, what about cakes? What about cakes? So for this, I brought here the Yalkut Joseph number brachot 1. We're gonna go to page 299. 1. No, it's separate. Outside the Tzurba. 299. I think I got the right page. Let's check. I prepared this year 3 weeks ago. We're supposed to give it, but never ended happening. So I wrote down stuff. I have to go back to it. Page 299. Let's take a look. Cake during a meal. If someone eats cake, strudel, or cookies during the meal or afterwards as a dessert, he does not recite any bracha before eating it. Since there are 3 definitions of what Pat haba b'kisnin is, remember Pat haba b'kisnin, we asked what it was. And cake does not fit all 3 definitions. It might be considered real bread. If it's considered real bread, then since it might be real bread, therefore hamotzi is enough. It's recommended though to refrain from eating any cake until after reciting Birkat Hamazon, and then make it borei minei mizonot on it. So again and again, we're seeing recommended practice: finish your meal, make Birkat Hamazon, and then eat your dessert, whether it's fruit, cake, or ice cream. That's the recommended practice, even during the week. Even during the week.
The morning when we're discussing, you swore usually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they say Amos.
Right.
So does it cover on Birkat Hamazon this Mazonot?
No, and what they say. So we'll get into that. It's possible that it is covered. Okay, baklava. Then he says here baklava. Okay. Baklava. What is baklava? It's mezanot.
What's it made of?
Made out of Turkish delight. You remember it? It's made out of wheat. Mezonot, and it has on it like sugar on top and stuff like that. And you have pistachio, different versions, right? Now, baklava, the issue with baklava is that it fits all 3 categories of a pat haba b'kisanin. Why? It's usually dryish, right? It's like crackerish. not moist, not like a moist cookie. It's dryish.
And it's moist too.
And it is a pocket. There's something inside, right? And it's usually sweetened dough, right? So according to everybody, hapata baba kisanin, this is it. This is actual mizonot. It's not hamotzi. This is mizonot. So some posts can rule that during a meal, when eating a part that is definitely pata baba kisanin, according to all their three definitions, one must recite the blessing of borei minim mizonot, since it's not covered by hamotzi. Baklava is filled with sugar and almond. Its dough is kneaded with oil and sugar and is dry and crunchy. Nevertheless, it's best to postpone eating this dessert until after reciting Birkat Hamazon. Okay. Okay, that's the best option. Okay, then he has on page 301 the last din for tonight, and we'll end up over here. I'll take your question in a minute, Malkiel. Bisli snacks. If someone wishes to eat snack foods made of flour, but do not resemble bread whatsoever, such as Israeli bisli snacks, he must recite the blessing of Borei Minei Mizonot, even in the middle of the meal, bisli, upon which he recited Hamotzi. The blessing of Hamotzi cannot cover such products. Bisli is wheat snacks. Super snacks. You've seen them. The blessing of Hamotzi cannot cover such food. Mizonot on that. It's not covered. It doesn't cover. It's not food. It's not part of the meal. It's not hamotzi. It's mizonot. You have to make a separate bracha. Bisli, you've seen it. All right, Malkiel.
Just a quick question. I know Shavuot's coming. What's the bracha on cheesecake? Especially the one from Bingo.
Bracha on cheesecake. Give me. Sorry to get you there. Yaakov Joseph halacha bracha 3, the last one. Bracha on cheesecake. What's the debate?
It has some crust on the bottom, so it's very minimum.
B'tofel, you're saying, since there's cheese on top and there's a crust on the
right,
bottom.
Right, majority, yeah, but there is some crust on the bottom. It's
so what
it's very minimum.
Rav Nathanael, what do you do with cheesecake that has a crust on the bottom? What bracha you make?
Look, honestly, I don't eat cheesecake.
He doesn't eat cheesecake. Temanim don't eat cheesecake. They can't even process it. It comes right out.
I don't think it's an ikar. So I don't think you make a bracha.
Yeah, it's probably just a shahako. Okay, cheesecake. Interestingly here, okay, here he says it's mizonot. He says it's mizonot. 2:12:12.
No, this is mizonot. Yeah.
2:12:12.
This is mizonot. Yeah.
2:12:12.
He's talking about cheesecake now. Shavuos, the 4 Shavuos.
Okay. Here he gives an interesting idea. Ice cream sandwiches. What bracha you make an ice cream sandwich? It's the same idea. So here he says in the Yaakov Joseph, when eating an ice cream sandwich made with cookies, one must recite Borei Minei Mizonot, and the ice cream is covered automatically. The cookies are considered the ikar.
Really? Okay, what if I say
this is what he says.
What if the cookie's not there?
So based on this, a cheesecake that has a crust will be mizonot. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you don't eat crust, you don't eat cheesecake.
So then he has here seconds in. He writes here, cheesecake without crust is shahako. Okay, fine. All right, we're gonna end here for tonight, Bez Hashem. Shkaya, thank you, everybody. Baruch Hashem, beautiful share before Shavuot. It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm sorry for the previous 2 weeks. Okay, I had the first week. I was with my wife. We went to an event, and last week I had a birthday. My sister's nephew had his upsharing, so. With a lot of stuff going on. I was actually planning to make the share last week. I was driving back from Pomona, from upstate, from Muncie, and
There's a major crash.
It took me almost 3 hours to get home.
There's a
With the
major
little
crash.
5 kids in the car.
It's Muncie, no?
5 kids in the car.
You know where the crash was?
It's in Muncie. Wow.
Right in front of the hospital. That's where you got stuck. I said it
Oh
took
my
me an hour. All right.
תודה רבה, שבוע טוב. חג
Thank you,
שמח.
Shabbat tov.
Thank you.
How do you say cake in Hebrew?
Uga,
Ugatvina.
uga.
Ugatvina here. Ugatvina.
I was just not in it.